Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Galactic Collaboration Summit. My name is Hani Loza. I'm a Principal PM Manager in the SharePoint and OneDrive team. Our team is responsible for all the migration investments, both from tooling and infrastructure capabilities.
And I'm Eric Warnke. I was one of the founders of Mover. Today, I help lead all things related to migration for Office 365.
Thank you, Eric. Our team's goal is to help you with the tools and the capabilities that will make your migration to Microsoft 365 easy. During this session, you will learn about the capabilities that are available for you and you can use today, including the SharePoint Migration Tool to help you migrate your content from on-premises to the cloud. You will have a first-hand experience with Mover to learn about how you can migrate your content from other cloud solutions to Microsoft 365. Finally, we'll introduce you to the new capability with Microsoft Migration Manager that is built into the SharePoint admin experience. But before we start migrating content, the first thing you would do is to understand and discover the content that you're about to migrate. The assessment phase is the most important phase in understanding the content and decide which content is ready to migrate, what content is no longer being used and you're ready to leave it behind, and what content needs remediation before you start migrating. With that, to help you with this phase, we have our first-party tool with built-in scanning capabilities that gives you an easy-to-read and comprehensive reports. So both the SharePoint Migration Tool and Mover have built-in scanning capabilities. And if you're migrating from SharePoint on-premises environment, you can leverage a SharePoint Migration Assessment tool to get an in-depth assessment of your on-premise environment. Finally, as the on-prem content tends to grow organically without little governance, you can leverage the Azure Information Protection Scanning tool to help classify and add label to your content before migrating. So now that you have a good assessment plan and a good migration plan, now we're ready to start migrating your content. The SharePoint Migration Tool helps you migrate content from file shares and SharePoint on-premises. Now we support SharePoint 2010, 2013, and newly added SharePoint 2016. You can use the SharePoint Migration Tool to migrate your content to Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Since we launched the SharePoint Migration Tool, we've had tremendous adoption. More than 33 petabytes of content has been migrated using the SharePoint Migration Tool, and it's been used by more than 80,000 tenants. Let me show you how easy it is to migrate your on-premises content to SharePoint and OneDrive. So here I'm in my SharePoint 2016 farm. Again, this could be 2010, 2013, or 2016 site. This is a traditional team site. As you can see, I have my document library. I have different libraries in my site. I also have a page that it has a web part and multiple libraries as well. This site also has subsites, drone, games, and electronics, and I want to migrate this site to SharePoint and OneDrive. So the first thing is I'm going to go to my SharePoint Migration Tool, and I'm going to start my first migration. As you can see, the latest version of the tool now supports SharePoint 2016. In addition to migrating from file share, as well as for bulk migration, I can bulk upload a file, CSV or JSON that has multiple of these sites already defined. I'm going to click on the SharePoint server, and I need to put the URL to the site I want to migrate from. Before, you used to have the perfect URL. Right now, you can just simply go to the browser, copy your URL, and paste it in. The tool is smart enough to figure out the right URL and trims all the access entries. You don't need a PhD in SharePoint to select the site that you want to migrate. Notice it now trims everything in the URL. I have the site URL. I can decide whether I want to include my subsite and if I want to migrate everything in there. If I click on a specific library, so in this case, I want to just migrate my document library. Again, I'm going to copy the URL, go back to my tool, And the tool is going to, again, parse through and figure out that this is a specific document library. Notice that at that point, I don't have the option to include all subsites. It defaults to the document library that I selected, and I'm ready to go. In this case, I'm ready to migrate this content to Teams. When I try to, the next step to select the source, the destination, I have very easy picker to decide what destination I want to migrate to. I can choose to migrate to Teams, SharePoint Teams site, or OneDrive. For this demo, I'm going to migrate to Microsoft Teams. And here, I get to choose which team do I want to migrate to. I only see in the team picker the teams that I'm a member of. I can simply search, and the filter will show me the teams that fit that particular filter. I'm going to select US Sales. The tool is going to make sure that I have the proper access to migrate content to this Teams. Once that is validated, I can select which channel within this team I can migrate to. I can select the channel, or if I want, I can select a specific folder within that channel, or even create a new folder. For this demo, I'm going to select a specific channel, which is Sales West. I'm going to click Next. And now this particular task, moving the document library from Northwest Sales to the US Sales Teams, has been registered. Notice that now that you have those icons that can help me understand where I'm coming from and where I'm migrating to. I'm going to add another source. In this case, I want to migrate my full SharePoint site to a SharePoint site in the cloud. Again, I'm going to click into my SharePoint source. I'm going to go back to my browser, go to my home page of the site, copy the URL, paste that in. And again, I'm going to select that I want to include all subsites for the migration, and I want to migrate all my lists and libraries and web parts. I'm going to click Next. And again, I'm going to decide where to migrate it to. Because I'm migrating the full team site, I can either migrate it to a team site that's already connected to Microsoft Teams or to a SharePoint team site. Notice that the OneDrive is no longer an option because I can only migrate content to OneDrive. So in this case, I'm going to select the SharePoint as a destination. And in this case, I can use the default path, or I can add a new site name. If the site already exists, I get a confirmation that the content will be copied to that particular site. If I decide to give it a different name, the tool will check whether this site exists or not, and this site does not exist, so the tool will create a modern team site for me. Clicking Next. Now this particular task, migrating the entire on-prem team site to SharePoint Online, is now available. I'll do one more task while I'm at it. This time I'm going to migrate my file share to my OneDrive. I'm going to put the path where my content is stored. Clicking Next. I'll pick that I want to move the content that I have in my file share to my OneDrive. Notice that I don't need to put the URL to my OneDrive anymore because I signed in with this user. That user email is populated and it figures out the location of my OneDrive. Very simple, just through my email. Clicking Next. Again, it creates a new task to migrate my content from file share to my OneDrive. And again, I get to pick whether I want to migrate it to the root document library or to a specific folder within my OneDrive. In this case, I'm going to select a folder that's called From File Share. I'm going to click Next. In the screen, I can review all the tasks that I've created. The first one from a document library to Microsoft Teams. In this one, I'm migrating all items in my site to SharePoint Online. Finally, I'm taking my content from my file share into my OneDrive. I'm going to click Next, and here I'm presented with simple settings that I can choose whether I want to perform scanning only, or if I want to preserve permissions or version history. I also have more options to select different settings, including the ability to scope my migration to files that are created after a certain date or modified after a certain date. I also have the capability to exclude certain file extensions in order to decide exactly how I want to run this migration. I'm happy with all these settings, so I'm going to get ready to click Migrate. I'm going to let this run, and I'm going to show you kind of an end result. So in here, this site that I migrated earlier, notice that I end up in a modern team site that I can later decide to groupify, which is associated to an Office 365 group, or even teamify it to associated with Microsoft Teams. All my documents are migrated with the metadata, all the subsites, my pages, my libraries, everything migrated intact. If I go to my OneDrive, all my content that I migrated from file share were migrated correctly into my folder from file share. Finally, if we take a look at Teams, I migrated content to US Sales. If I go to Sales West, look under Files, and I should see all my content that I've migrated directly from on-premises to Teams. How easy was that? What you've seen is a very simple way to migrate your content with high fidelity from on-premises to the cloud. You've seen that the SharePoint Migration Tool can help you ease the migration complexity by creating the site structure for you. The SharePoint Migration Tool will create a modern SharePoint team site if the site didn't exist. And now you can do that for SharePoint migration as well as file share migration. The tool will also create your libraries, your list, your web parts, and will preserve your navigation as well. We have a much easier integration and tighter integration with Teams, so you can simply use the tool that will guide you into figuring out the destination. You'll have a simple Teams picker to select the teams that you want to migrate to, and you can target specific channels to migrate your content. Finally, we've added the capability to introduce user feedback. So with one click, you can report issues or provide feedback in order to give us that information. Now I want to introduce Eric to talk about Mover.
Cheers, Hani. Mover was purpose-built as a self-serve tool for administrators, small and large. Over the years, we worked so closely with Microsoft that last fall, we decided to officially join forces. With Mover, you can create migrations from a wide variety of sources such as Box, Dropbox, and Google Drive. And the best part is that you can manage those migrations without leaving your browser. Now, without further ado, I'm going to show you a live demo of how Mover works. So the first thing you'll notice when we get into the Mover web app is that we have this concept of a source and a destination. I've gone through the liberty of already logging in and skipping the steps for authenticating our accounts. So what I'm going to do is just connect to an already authenticated Box account. And then on the destination side, I'm going to connect to my demo Office 365 tenant. And you can see here that Mover has automatically discovered that this Box account has a few users, and it also has discovered some SharePoint sites and users on the Office 365 site. We're pretty smart, so we try and warn you in advance that there might be some problems with things like long paths. And we will scan for that and make sure that you know about this before you actually migrate any data. So we'll continue the migration setup, and you're dumped into what we call our migration manager. Now, it has a lot of powerful information in it, but it's empty right now. So the first thing we need to do is add some users. So I'll click Add Users, and the side panel for adding users to this migration opens up. There's two ways to do it. You can automatically ask Mover to discover some users in Box, or you can give us a large CSV file with all your custom source and destination path configurations. For now, I'm going to auto discover. We reach out to Box and to Office 365 and pull a user list. And in a few seconds here, we should see that Mover has automatically added a lot of users that we have determined can automatically map between Office 365 and Box. Each one of these we treat like a path, and we take the liberty of automatically creating a destination folder during the migration so that your data doesn't get mixed up if you're already using Office 365. In this case, these are OneDrive for business accounts. The first thing we want to do is figure out exactly what you're migrating. So we check all the users off, and we go up here and say, let's scan it. All of these users are pushed into an Azure queue where Mover runs, and this scan process starts for our product. We reach out to Box, we go over every single folder and file for these users, and we find out what you actually have so that you're prepared for your migration. Now, while those are scanning, and you can see some data has already started to show up here, we're going to go and make sure that our migration is ready to run. We have a lot of different options, including customizing the interface, looking at different migration reports, but importantly, we have what we call a permission map. Now, our permission map is similar to the list of users, except it's not what is migrating, it is what that data is being shared with. So when you transfer a file or a folder, you want to make sure that all the collaborators come across during a migration. Similarly to the adding users, you can auto-discover or manually upload a CSV. Here I've chosen to auto-discover, and we can see that Mover has decided that the domain name mover.io during the migration looks like it should line up to the domain name mover.io.onmicrosoft.com. This is good for corporations who are changing domain names during the migration. Users that don't necessarily automatically map, we still discover, and we can also work with groups. In this case, I don't have any groups set up in Office 365, but we make sure that we preserve those during your migration. Now that that permission map is set up, we can go and we can see that one of these users has already completed their scan. Adele here only had 1,000 files. So the next step is to literally just start migrating them. We make sure that you know that your parachute is packed before you jump. So we tell you exactly what is going to happen. We say this source is going into this destination folder and when it's going to happen, in this case right away. I'm going to hit start, and that goes back into the queue to be processed for migration. While Adele is running, we can actually go and inspect all the details about that transfer, including log files. When we open up the transfer summary for this user, we see a lot of metadata and useful information for administrators to help troubleshoot or just glean information from their transfers. And then we also see log files. We track every instance of a transfer, whether it's copying data or not. So for example here, if I open this log file, you can see that we track every single operation that happens and provide to you any information you might need to troubleshoot your transfers. That's the gist of it. This is how you use Mover to move 1 or 100,000 users into Office 365. Now to wrap up, a few things have changed since we joined Microsoft. First of all, we are now free and free worldwide. All you need to do is log in with your Microsoft account and you're good to go. Secondly, we've also introduced migrating box notes into the OneNote format. And lastly, we're already on a tear. We've already migrated over 8 petabytes of content for thousands of customers. You should visit mover.io today to give us a try. Back to you, Hani.
Thank you, Eric. So with the SharePoint Migration Tool helping you to migrate your content from on-premises and Mover to migrate content from cloud, you've got easy solutions to kickstart your migration project. But to even make it simpler for you, you can leverage the Migration Manager to migrate your content and centrally manage large migrations right from the SharePoint admin experience. Migration Manager offers a simple and unified experience right from the SharePoint admin. Currently, it supports file share migration, and you can simply manage your large migration by load balancing all your migration tasks across multiple clients. Let me show you how easy it is to manage a large migration. So I'm right here in the SharePoint Admin Center. Notice that there is a migration group. I'm going to click on that. I can go into Migration Manager, or I can simply download the SharePoint Migration Tool if I want to do a SharePoint migration, or a link that points me to Mover in order to migrate my cloud content. I'm going to click on Migration Manager to start my file share migration. In this first run experience, I get a simple guide to help me step by step on what I need to do to start my first migration. The first thing is, because I'm migrating content from on-premises file share, I need to install an agent on my on-prem environment that can connect to the file share to migrate the content. Second, I need to create a migration task to start migrating my content. So I'm going to simply download the agent. Once I run that, all I need to do is log in with my Office 365 account and provide an on-prem account that has access to my file share. So I'll log in with my admin account. And once I log in, now this agent is going to be connected to this tenant specifically. And then the next thing is I need to specify that domain account that has access to my file share. Once that account is validated, that's all I need to do, and my agent will be set up and ready to start the migration tasks. That was pretty simple, and from this point on, I do not need to touch that agent anymore. All the interaction from now on is going to be through the Office 365 experience. Next, I can create my first task. I'll come in and can decide whether I want to migrate a single folder or I want to do a bulk migration. In order to do a single folder, I'll choose that. I'll provide the path where my content is stored on the file share. And I can decide which destination. In this case, I'll choose this document library. And again, I can decide which document library I want to migrate to, and if I want to migrate to a specific folder. I'm happy with this document library. That's where I want to be. And notice that I get the same interface I have with the SharePoint Migration Tool. I can specify a task name, and I can decide whether I want to perform a scan or apply any of the other settings very similar to what we've seen before with the SharePoint Migration Tool. I'm happy with the settings I have, and I'm ready to migrate. Now I have a very simple task that is currently queued. It's basically waiting for an agent to be ready to migrate. So now switching to an environment that's already set up for a scale migration, you notice here that I've created multiple agents because I'm ready to do a larger migration and I want to distribute the task across multiple machines. So these machines were set up earlier. I can go in and I can provide a friendly name for this agent. And I can decide whether I want to keep this agent enabled, or if I want to take it out of the rotation, I can mark it as disabled. I can come in to tasks and I can decide to do my large migration. I'm going to click on bulk migration, browse to select my CSV file that has multiple tasks already identified. Again, I can give that a friendly name. And once I run these tasks, Migration Manager is going to parse through the CSV, enumerate the individual tasks, and then queue them up for execution. I've ran this task earlier. I can come in and get the detail for that particular task. I can get a status and understand the completion state, how many files were migrated. If I have scan information, I'll know how many files were scanned, if there's any issues with the scan, which agent executed this migration, and so forth. I can always come back and apply different settings before I rerun this task. Finally, I can decide if I want to rerun this task, delete it, or if I have multiple tasks, I can generate a summary report to aggregate all the reports across multiple tasks. So just to recap, with the SharePoint Migration Tool, with Mover and Migration Manager, you have plenty of capabilities to manage your own migration. But if you need additional help, I want to introduce you to the Fast Track Migration Benefit. The Fast Track Migration Benefit helps you migrate content from FileShare, Box, Google Drive, and now they support migrating from Dropbox to SharePoint and OneDrive. The Fast Track benefit is available for our Office 365 customers with 500 seats or more. And for all other migration needs, we have a great ecosystem of third-party ISVs that can help you with all your migration projects. So just to summarize all the options, we have first-party tools that you can leverage to self-serve your own migration between the SharePoint Migration Tool, Mover, and now having the Migration Manager as a unified experience, currently supporting FileShare, and eventually will keep adding additional support. Fast Track can help you with FileShare and some of the cloud scenarios, and ISVs and partners will help you with other sources as well. So with that, I want to end with a quick call of action. You can use the SharePoint Migration Tool to migrate your content from on-premises to the cloud. Migration Manager will help you migrate your FileShare content. Finally, Mover can help you migrate all your content from third-party cloud providers to SharePoint and OneDrive. Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the Galactic Collaboration Summit. Join the community and meet in-person world-class Microsoft and MVP speakers this autumn in Wiesbaden, Frankfurt, Germany, with 15 full-day tutorials and over 150 Microsoft 365 and Azure sessions at the combined European Collaboration Summit and European Cloud Summit from 26 to 28 October 2020. Community rocks.